pleasure to introduce Jacob to you. Jacob George I've known for a long time. He's family. And I'll tell you some things about him that he won't tell you himself. Now, I'd like to tell you some stories on him, but I really don't have anything, funny or stories that he wouldn't want to tell. I'm sure there are some, but I just don't know them. Jacob is brilliant, and he's recently, in the last year or two, decided to take his life's work in a different direction, and I think, as an example of trying to be Spirit-led, trying to follow something that is more in line with serving the Lord than what he was doing, and he may tell you that story, and a little of it is in the bio that's in the bulletin there. But it took some courage to do that, and I think the Lord's blessing him in that process. We've been working on this seminar, is it been a year maybe? I started encouraging him to think about it because nobody in the Brotherhood is doing this. There's people out there that, the Financial Peace University type thing, but not in our Brotherhood. And so I think it's a needed subject as we look at the Holy Spirit and being led by the Spirit. Our key verse there, we're trying to walk according to the Spirit, not the flesh. And our finances are something that can sure take us the wrong way, but we do have some choices on that. And I'm looking forward to what Jacob has to say, and I think we're in for a treat here. So, Jacob, I won't take any more of your time.
Good morning. Does everybody have a handout? Just raise your hand if you still need one. I have some more back here. Okay. Thank you. Okay. All right. Let me try a different marker. So what is belief? What does it mean to believe something? When we found out that my wife, Caitlin, was pregnant with our daughter, Nora, we knew that we would have to designate somebody to take care of her if the both of us were to leave this earth. And so we asked ourselves, who do we believe would be the most desirable situation for our daughter to be in? Who do we believe would we want to raise our daughter? And so after some deliberation, we made the decision of who to include in the will. Because we believed that we knew who would do a good job, we then entrusted them with the potential responsibility of our daughter. So what does it mean to believe? I'll refer to one of my favorite quotes from Jordan Peterson. And so this is a handout of blanks if you just want to follow along, and we're going to start filling them in. But he says, "It is your actions that most accurately reflect your beliefs." He says beliefs are implicit, embedded in your being, underneath your conscious apprehensions and surface-level knowledge. You can only find out what you actually believe, rather than what you think you believe, by watching how you act. You simply don't know what you believe before that. You are too complex to understand yourself. He goes on to say, the Bible is the foundational document of Western civilization. It's the product of processes that remain fundamentally beyond our comprehension. And its careful, respectful study can reveal things to us about what we believe, how we do and should act, that can be discovered in almost no other manner. We're obviously very good at using the Bible in this manner to teach us about ourselves, what we should believe, and then what we actually do believe. So this morning, we are going to discuss some key biblical principles for how we are to operate in this world that God has created. And I am here talking about them because several years ago, it became apparent to me that I did not believe. Sorry, am I cutting out? Does it sound like I'm cutting out to you? Okay. And anyways, I'm here talking about them because the principles we're going to talk about today, I realized I didn't actually believe them to be true. I thought I did. I would have told you that I did, but it was not the case. So let's get started. It is my understanding that we have a couple birthdays today. Is it anybody's birthday in here? One right here? One right here? Maybe more than, oh my goodness. Okay, so we have 3 birthdays today? Excellent. So what we're going to do is we're all going to make you a sign that says happy birthday. So please flip over your handout, and I want you to make a nice big happy birthday sign, and I will do it as well. Nice and big, so that you can be able to see it from afar away. All right. Everybody finished? Show me your happy birthday signs. Excellent. Very good. How big did you know how to make the letters? How did you decide? Okay, according to the paper, I have parameters. I have my start, my end point, and then I can go about filling in all the letters. Maybe some planned for this a little better than others, but we all got the job done. So we have the parameters of the start point and the end point. You can flip that back over. We're done with the birthday sign. Now, sorry, I lost my marker. There it is. If I were to make a timeline of my life, it might look a little something like this. I have my start point, and then I have today, and now that I have these parameters of where I start and where I finish, I can go about filling in all the different historical details of my life. Now, let's say that instead of making a timeline up to this point, I wanted to try and make one to represent my entire life. How would I do that? So I still have my start point, but it gets a little trickier. What event represents when my timeline ends? When does it stop? Okay, upon my death. So how do I represent that on my timeline if I want to be as accurate as I possibly can? And it's kind of a trick question. Why might that be a trick question? Okay, we don't know when we're going to die? Maybe. Okay, we don't really die. Kind of a countercultural answer. But my timeline, well, I'll get to that in a little bit. Okay, but if I wanted to make my timeline accurate, I need to use the most accurate definitions of life and then death, which is something that we hopefully will never experience. So what exactly is death? Please open your Bibles to John chapter 8. John chapter 8, verse 51. And if somebody could just read that verse for us, nice and loud, John 8:51. Can I get somebody?
Sure.
Right here.
Truly, I say to you, if anyone keeps my word, he will never see death.
Okay, and that's the next answer on our handout. According to Jesus, when are we going to die? Never. If you and I keep God's words, we are never going to die. We are never going to experience death in the realist and most accurate definition of that word. Paul's even going to clarify how we talk about worldly death by saying, he says, I don't want you to be misinformed about those who have fallen asleep. So what is death? Well, in the same way that the laws of nature just define cold as the absence of heat, God's laws of nature also define death as the absence of what he has created for us, and that is life. So what is life? What does Jesus say that life is? Well, this is life, that they know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent. That they know you. So what is life? Relationship with God. A relationship with the very one who created us. Knowing the one who gives us purpose and direction. And doesn't that make a lot of sense? That in a world that is always searching for fulfillment in other places, that what is life is the only thing that will actually provide that fulfillment. And if life is relationship with our Creator, when does life begin? Okay, when we're baptized. It already has begun. When does life begin? It already has. Our experience with the concept of life, technically eternal life, has already begun. Is that to say that death has also already begun? Absolutely it has. Leaving my body is not at all a prerequisite for being considered dead. We see this talked about by Jesus and Paul, that many people, perhaps most people, are dead long before their hearts ever stop beating. So back to our timeline, if I want to make this as accurate as possible, it does not end. Now, a pretty significant event will occur where I leave my body, but if I wanted to represent that here, it'd probably be somewhere around here. And in fact, this is still not really accurate because this should be as infinitely close to the start point as possible. But then you wouldn't be able to see this right here, the time we spend on this earth. It's not very big, but it is critically important. In John chapter 8, did Jesus say that nobody would ever see death? As much as it breaks our hearts and shatters God's, not everybody will have life. We see sheep and goats being separated, people being told, after having never accepted that relationship with God, that I never knew you. That relationship was never there. Not everybody will avoid death, but we have really, really good news. Because what did Jesus say? If anybody keeps my words, he will never see death. And then by the grace of God, what did he give to us? His words, his instructions. Not only has God given us the opportunity for life, he created a world, he put us in it, he made life available to us, but he even told us exactly how we can accept it. In fact, the God of the universe wants me to have life so badly that he died for me to bridge the gap and told me exactly how I need to operate here in the short term so that I can live with him forever. Because how we live in the short term determines if we live long term. If we believe in him and we accept him in baptism and our lives make it evident that we believe everything that he's told to us, then our eternal life with God has already begun. Now, if you didn't know, I'm here today to talk about money. And what on earth does any of this have to do with money? Is it because the love of money is the root of all evil? Or money problems are the leading cause of divorce? No, those are no small things. Money is much, much more than a temptation or a destroyer of our marriages. Imagine that you were going to make some sort of prediction based on your beliefs. It might be who's going to win the game or what the market's going to do. And if I were to say to you, you want to put your money where your mouth is, what do I mean by that? That expression that we use, what does that mean?
Back up what you're saying.
Okay, back up what you're saying. If you really believe this cause to be worth it, if you really are into it, then let's go ahead and double down on it. How do you double down on it? With something that we all find a great deal of value in, and that is money. Now, I'm not condoning gambling, by the way, but what I am saying is that money, or rather the way we direct it, reveals what is important to us. Money reveals our values. Our free market economy is built on this very principle. People will spend money on what they see value in. There's a financial planner based out of Houston. His name is Cody Garrett. He's kind of a hero of mine. And something that Cody loves to do is review people's credit card statement. He cannot get enough of it. Why? Because Cody is a people person. He loves getting to know people. And your spending statements are the best way to get to know you. If I wanted to get to know you, I could say, tell me about yourself, tell me something I don't know, and little by little, over time, we would get to know each other. Or I could say, I see that you eat at this restaurant every single Thursday and spend the exact same amount of money. What do you order? Who do you go with? Are you always with the same people? What other routines do you have in your life? And we can start getting to know each other very fast. Maybe get to know you better than you know yourself. So let's go ahead and try it out. At the back of this handout is a piece of paper. Let me see. Okay, towards the back, you'll see a list of credit card transactions. Look something like this. And as you look at it, just go ahead and take it out and look it over, peruse it at all the lines. And what is something that you think this person might find valuable? What is something you might learn about this person? Okay, loves to eat at McDonald's. Very good.
McDonald's coffee on Tuesday morning.
Okay, very good. The amount is very small. So what we're doing is we're seeing this person orders, minimal amounts at McDonald's. They do have good coffee? I tried it one time. I'm not a coffee person, but you're very close. So this person might have a standing appointment at McDonald's every 7 days or so, and might really enjoy the deals on the McDonald's app. What are other things that we might learn from this list?
Likes Walmart.
Likes Walmart? Big fan of Walmart. That's very true.
They own a vehicle.
What's that?
They own a vehicle.
Okay, how do you know that?
Buy gas.
They buy gas? Where do you see gas being bought?
Walmart gas.
Okay. This other strange, mysterious Ozark beverage company, $40 a pop. Are they an alcoholic, or are they filling up at a very unusually named gas station? But very good, very astute. By the way, this is me. This is my spending statement. Yep, that's right. Very good. Very good. Very good money detectives. Y'all would be very good at this. So how we direct money speaks volumes about what we think is important. Money tells a story I like to call How I See the World. How I see the world. How do we see the world? Go ahead and turn your Bibles to Matthew chapter 6. Matthew chapter 6, and I'm going to do the same as soon as I locate my Bible. Oh, thank you. All right. Scripture gives us countless examples of how people understood this world to be based on how they treated material resources. Some had a very good understanding of the world. I think of people like Abraham and Joseph and Noah. And some people had a very bad and sad understanding of this world. People like Judas or Cain, Ananias and Sapphira. But let's take a look at what Jesus had to say about this world we live in. Starting in verse 19, he says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money." All right. So what does Jesus say about how this world works? Well, we ought to lay up treasures in heaven. But why? Does Jesus say to do it because it is morally right? No. I agree with you. It may be true that this is the right thing to do, but that's not the argument that he's making. It's not that we lay up treasures in heaven because it's the right thing to do. But Jesus tells us that we lay up treasures in heaven because it is the smart thing to do. It's not that we're overly self-sacrificial. It's just that we're not stupid. Because laying up treasures in heaven is the only thing that makes any sense. Jim Elliot once said, "He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain that which he cannot lose." And not only is this the most obvious conclusion for how we are to live, but what other option do we even have? We lay up treasures in heaven because it gives us perspective. It gives us perspective. You know that insight we're looking for to see if we're operating properly in this world? And if we're set to spend our eternity with God? Well, laying up treasures in heaven gives us that insight, that perspective. Jesus says that when we have a healthy eye, our whole body will be full of light. When we have the right perspective, our focus will naturally shift towards eternity. And that eternal perspective will radiate out of us to the people around us as if our whole body was full of light. And lastly, when Jesus says you cannot serve both God and money, anybody's translation have a different word for money, perhaps? Wealth? What was that? Mammon. Okay, I really like that many translations still use the literal translation of that word, because sometimes I think when we think of money that we think about dollars in a bank account, when really we know this to mean material wealth and all the we might trade that material wealth for, which might even be intangibles like freedom or security. So Jesus is not only telling us not to serve dollars, but he's telling us that we all have a throne in our lives, a throne that is big enough for only one, and something is going to occupy it. How do we know what is occupying that throne? By taking a look at where our treasure is, by what we value with our time and our money. So what does our use of time and money say about what we value? If money is an expression of how we see the world, how do we see the world? Well, how should we see the world? What are some things we can know about this beautiful place that God has created so that we can then know how to operate properly within it? Well, at a basic level, who made the world So whose does it belong to? Who made me, and whose do I belong to? Because again, not only did the creator of the universe make everything, but he picked me to be a part of it. And then he gave me this, his word, so that I would be aware of that. So that I would never have to wonder why I'm here or what I was made for. But rather so that I would know that most of life does not happen on this earth. I had a coworker one time that I really liked. He was kind of quirky, funny, liked to break the silence of our morning video calls with a little fun fact or whatever was on his mind. And one morning, what was on his mind that day was, he said, "Isn't it funny that we say life is short when it is literally the longest thing that we will ever experience?" And I remember how sad that made me, kind of hearing his perspective on that. And after, he died. So, but we know that's not. We know that life is long. It is earth that is short. Do we believe that? How do we know if we do? Because we say that we do? We really feel like we do? Or are there more accurate metrics to indicate what our beliefs are than our own thoughts and feelings? Anybody know when class ends, by the way? 20? Okay. I need to gauge real quick. I think we'll be fine. Okay, what does it mean to be a steward? Would anybody like to help me out? What does that mean, to be a steward? Okay, caregiver. Manager, very good. So we're going to say a steward is someone who's been entrusted with the responsibility of taking care of someone else's property. Someone's been appointed to manage something that belongs to somebody else. So are we stewards? You bet we are. From top to the bottom, if nothing belongs to us, even our own life, we are stewards in certainly every single aspect of our lives. Not just financially, but that's what we'll focus on this afternoon. So the question is not whether or not you are a steward. The question is whether or not you are a good one. What would a good steward do? Manage their money well, sure. But what does that mean? And how do we know if we're doing it? If somebody puts you in charge of something, maybe a project at work, and you weren't really sure how to handle it, what might be the best place to start to figure it out? Ask questions. Very good. How about we ask the person who entrusted us with the task what their desired outcome is for us? What would you like me to do? How would you like me to handle this? And thankfully for us, God has given us plenty of info to handle these questions already. But before we get into that, I have one question for you. What is money? What is the purpose of money?
Held in exchange of goods and services.
Okay, exchange of goods and services to buy things. Why might we buy things? Okay, security. We have needs, we have wants. We have basic human needs that we need to tend to. We have wants, things that would be nice to have. I'd enjoy. What else might you use money for? Is it for our needs and our desires, but what else? Okay, so we have the extreme side of the wants, for sure. Sorry, go ahead. A tool, very good. Last month, we all celebrated probably the biggest holiday in America by giving each other gifts. So let's say I want to buy you a present, something that I know that you're really going to like. And I do a little thinking and some research, and I come up with the perfect gift for you. So I ordered it online, and it comes in the mail, and it is absolutely mangled. It is unusable, destroyed. We're both looking at it. What is something that you might say to me to make me feel better about what has just happened? It's the thought that counts. Very good. It's the thought that counts. What is more important than what the gift was that it showed how you felt about me, that you were thinking about me. You wanted to do something for me. So what is money? It is an expression of how we see the world and the people in it. I can use it to show someone that I care about them. Now, obviously, you don't have to use money to show somebody you care about. In fact, it's usually more difficult not to. But money can be used to show somebody you care. It can be used as a relationship builder to get to know somebody, to share an experience with them, because money is relational. Money is relational. Jesus tells us this in Luke 16 when he tells us what our money is for. Anybody remember what he said money is for? He says, use your worldly wealth to do this. Let's turn there to Luke 16. Luke chapter 16, and we'll start in verse 1. There was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was wasting his possessions. He called him in and said to him, "What is this I hear about you? Turn in the account of your management, for you can no longer be manager. You're fired." The manager said to himself, "What shall I do, since my master is taking the management away from me? I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I've decided what to do, so that when I'm removed from management, people may receive me into their houses." So summoning his master's debtors one by one, he said to the first, "How much do you owe my master?" He said, 100 measures of oil. He said, "Quickly, take your bill and write 50. He said to another, "How much do you owe?" He said, 100 measures of wheat. He said to him, "Take your bill and write 80. The master, who had apparently found out about this, commended the dishonest manager for his shrewdness. End of parable. So what just happened? A manager is fired, but before he leaves, he decides to negotiate with his owner's debtors to sign new contracts in which they owe less than they actually do, in the hopes that these debtors will somehow be obliged to him for when he doesn't have a job or a place to live, that they'll help him out. This dishonest manager came up with a plan to manipulate money in order to secure his future. The manager finds out about this, and what does he say? Does he say, "How dare you? Get out of town. I never want to see you again"? Maybe all we know that he said was, "Hey, that was really smart of you." He commends them on his shrewdness. And this is where Jesus' story ends. So what on earth is Jesus trying to say? Look at all the thought and the foresight this man put into securing himself a future home. Look at how hard he worked. Really, it's a congratulations is in order for this man. He saw a problem, he came up with a plan, he executed it, and it appeared to work. If this manager is telling him, "Good job." Jesus recognizes the good. Sorry. Can you hear me okay if I take this off, do you think? No? Okay. It is in there. I'll take it out. I'll leave it there. Jesus recognizes the good qualities of this man that are used for bad purposes. Qualities like foresight, intellect, determination. In Alexander McLaren's commentary of this parable, he makes this statement: "The secret of success religiously is precisely the same as the secret of success in ordinary things. Jugglers and fiddlers, circus riders and dancers, and people of that sort who are learning a skill or practicing their craft. They spend far more time upon efforts to perfect themselves in their profession than 99 out of every 100 professing Christians do to make themselves true followers of Christ. They know that nothing is to be got without working for it. So look at your daily life. Do you give anything like the effort to grow in the knowledge of your Lord and Savior Jesus Christ than you do to make or maintain your position in this world? Look at how hard this dishonest manager worked to secure himself a place in this world, a temporary future where moth and rust destroy and thieves break in and steal. So how much harder should we be working to secure a permanent one? Just look at the world around you. Look at how zealously they pursue wealth and pleasures. Day in and day out, they put in the work. Look at what they're willing to go through to clamor for some semblance of security. At least the world is consistent. They know what they want, they'll do anything to get it, and they work for it every day. Can you imagine if we pursued the kingdom of God with that same vigor? Do we know what we want? Do we work for it every day? Immediately after this parable, verse 9, Jesus says, I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it is gone, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Where the shrewd manager manipulated money to secure himself a temporary future, we are to manipulate worldly wealth to secure a permanent one, not just for ourselves, but for others. So what is money for? To influence eternal outcomes. Jesus says that one day, very soon, money won't mean anything at all. It'll be completely useless, no value. But not yet. We can use money now to alter circumstances later, everlasting circumstances, for both ourselves and especially for others. Are we rich? Yes, absolutely. In the movie RV, Robin Williams' character is asked by his son Carl, hey, Dad, are we poor? And Robin Williams says, Carl, well, there's a lot of ways to measure a family's wealth. His son says, I was talking about money. Oh, we're dirt poor. And today I'm talking about money. Would you consider yourself to be rich? And you have to forgive me on the handout. I test ran this material in Arkansas. So whenever it says Arkansas, just cross through that and put Kansas. But the median household income in the state of Kansas is about, as of this year, $68,000 a year per household. In Arkansas, it was 54, so I'm having to change my notes a little bit. So meaning a family bringing in $68,000 is making more than exactly half of Kansans and less than exactly half of Kansans. What do you think the median household income is worldwide? If you had to guess. Anybody want to try?
10 to 20,000.
10 to 20,000, good guess. Anybody else? 3,000?
40.
Sid,
The answer is 3,000. How did you know that? Oh, very good guess. The median household income in the world is just under $3,000 a year. So if you're the median Kansan, you are making more than 97% of all the families in the world. So if you're like me and you live in a home with heat and water, you have enough to eat, your own car, you have your own phone, if you have internet in your own house, then you're not just rich, but you are extravagantly wealthy. The vast majority of people cannot begin to imagine all that we have. To whom much is given, much is required. And we've been given much. So what is required of us? adequate stewardship. But what is that? If these three conditions are true, that life is long, but our time on earth is very short, that nothing is ours, rather everything we have has been given to us by the one who created us, and that he has told us that we are to use what he's given us in the short term to affect what will happen here in the upcoming and permanent long term. If those things are true, then what are we to do? What will we now do to make it evident that we believe these things to be true? Because you can only find out what you believe rather than what you think you believe by watching how you act. And for too many years, I did not believe any of this. If someone were to look at me, they would have seen somebody who thinks that they have all the time in the world to get it together. They would have seen someone who saved all the money that they could and would not let go because it was mine. And they would have seen somebody who thought the purpose of money was to have as much fun as you can or be as comfortable as you can before I died. But we can't live like this, or we won't live at all. Because how we live in the short term determines if we live in the long term. And that is what we'll explore this afternoon. So thank you for your attention.
Does everybody have a handout where there's print on the other side of the paper? It's not single-sided anymore. Was anybody lucky enough to get one of those to start with? Okay.
Is there a prize?
I have nothing. Okay. Well, thank you all for staying. And thank you for, I don't know most of you yet, but thank you for allowing me to do something that I like to do, that I find so much joy in. So thank you for that. This morning was, we kind of did a biblical look, for those of you who maybe taught class downstairs, of why we ought to care about money in the first place. This will be more of a tangible way to make that actionable in a modern world. So that's what we'll do today. Some of this you will know. Hopefully, at least some of this it may elicit questions that you have. So I'm going to do my best to get through all the material. It's possible that won't happen. If you're particular like me and you want to know what all the blanks are, just come see me and I'll tell you what they are. Okay. Can you be financially healthy without a budget? First of all, what is a budget? We'll define that as, and this is on your sheet, a budget is a game plan of the money coming in and the money going out. It's a living representation of financial activity, and we use it to assign our money different jobs. So it gives us insight into our financial health. So again, can you be financially healthy without a budget to tell you that you are? Is it possible? I would say yes. I would say it's possible. Just like I don't have to go to the doctor to necessarily be considered healthy, but it definitely helps. But I believe it's possible, although not probable, to be financially healthy without a budget. Now, can you be a good steward without a budget? Is that possible? What do you think? No? Okay. I would tend to agree with that. That maybe the main purpose of our budget is not to give us insight into our financial health, but maybe it's to tell us something far more important. I goofed on the handout again, and you should have had a slip of paper. Y'all might. My budget is from years and years ago is in there. It's a budget from soon after Caitlin and I were married. We had just graduated Harding. We were working, jobs in our fields of study. And so that's what this budget is. I went ahead and put it on the board, just the highlights, because most of you don't have it. But our budget was, split up into savings, bills, some household expenses, food, medical, auto. Dogs had their own category. I know where to put them. And personal. And so 51% of our budget was savings, 25% bills, 2% household, 6 food, 2 medical, 4 auto, 2 dogs, and 6 personal. Now, like we looked at my credit card statement this morning, what is something that you might learn about what was important to me from these figures? Okay, say dogs are up there. They have their own category. And savings. Savings was very important to me. One of the reasons I'm here today talking about money is because when it comes to having a broken idea of what money is, I am chief of sinners. Money was my ticket to freedom, to time freedom. And having enough money was the only thing that stood between me and what I wanted. And by the way, if the main reason for your retirement is the freedom and optionality to do whatever you want, whenever you want, the consensus seems to be that you will be sorely disappointed when that time comes. But I didn't know that. I wanted to retire ASAP so that I would never have to do anything I didn't want to do ever again. At least I thought that's what I might get to do. So whatever Caitlin wanted to spend money on was now an immediate threat to my early retirement. And I could not let that happen. And so we fought about money constantly. It was by far the most common fight we had for about a year and a half, once a week. We had a good money fight. All fights that could have been prevented if I had had an appropriate understanding of money. You might also notice we weren't giving anything at all to church. In fact, I came up with every excuse as why I shouldn't have to necessarily, because that would hinder what I was trying to do. But we'll talk about that more later. So what is a budget? It's a representation of financial activity to tell us that we're financially healthy. Yes, it is that. But I don't think that's why we need to have one. We need a budget because it is an intentional declaration of what is important to you. It is objective in writing, no denying it. How we spend money tells a story about how we understand the world around us. So do our budgets tell a story of somebody who believes that life never ends, that this time here is temporary? Or do our budgets tell a story of somebody who is trying to be as comfortable as I can before I move on? If we don't have a budget, what else are we using to tell us what is important to us? What objective metric might we be employing to tell us who we truly are? Or are we relying on our own thoughts and our own feelings? Jeremiah 17 says, "The heart is deceitful above all things. Who can understand it?" Are we leaning on our own understanding? If we want a full picture of where we are, it is time to rip off the Band-Aid and dive into parts of ourselves that might make us kind of uncomfortable. And we need a real and undeniable source of data to teach that to us. And that is why I believe we need to have a budget. Because a good steward, principle number 1, is well informed of their management. All right. Let's talk about giving. Specifically giving to God. If the God of the universe is the God of the universe, why might a human person give him money? Why would an element of his creation, being myself, give him another aspect of his creation, money? What good does that do? Why give to God? What do you think? Why give to God? What's that? Okay. Money might maybe give some the perception of buying their way to heaven. Sure. Why else? Why do we give? Absolutely. Yeah, Paul gives lots of examples of the people who helped him out and the people who fueled his work. Absolutely. It's a big part of giving. So giving to God, number one, giving to God sets our priorities. Because money is an expression of our values, giving to God proves to ourselves that God is important in our lives. And when we give something to God, something that we find a lot of value in, it reminds us of the nature of that relationship. It reminds us that God is very big and we are very small, and nothing really belongs to us in the first place. So when we give, say, 10%, that is our acknowledgement of who the 90% actually belongs to. So when we commit to give money to God, we establish the priority of God's importance in our lives. Number two, giving to God grows our relationship with him. It gives us an opportunity to offer something that's valuable to us, like we said, and therefore pleasing to him. It lets us to kind of say, God, I know that you created all things, including me and everything I've been given. There's no way I can ever adequately say thank you, but here's something that's valuable to me and sometimes hard to part with, and I want you to have it so that you know how important this relationship is to me. All right, number three, we talked about this morning, but giving to God obliterates idolatry. Idolatry, anything that we're seeking after, or definition I heard years ago that I like a lot because it's just, I feel, more applicable to me. Anything that we attribute success to other than God. All right. How much should we be giving? This is not a conversation we have at church very much because it can sometimes be uncomfortable. But let's go ahead and talk about it. How much should we be giving? 10%? We kind of hear that figure a lot. We ought to be tithing, specifically giving 10%. So is tithing, giving 10% to God, something that we really have to do? Isn't that kind of legalistic? For the first few years after we got out of school, I did not tithe at all. I did not think it was necessary. I kind of saw it as more of a recommendation, but not something that I had to do, and so I did not. Was that wrong? I'll let you kind of come to that conclusion yourself. But I believe that giving, at least to the point of tithing, is something that God intends for us to do. And I'd like to share why. So a common criticism of tithing is that it is legalistic, part of the old law. We're not bound by it. Jesus has freed us from it. But what might be a problem with that philosophy? What do you think? The idea that tithing is legalism, part of the old law, something that was in the past. What's the problem with that sentiment?
In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus always took it up a notch. He said, you say, the old law says it's wrong to hate. I mean, it's wrong to murder. I say it's wrong to hate. It's wrong to commit adultery. I say it's wrong to, look at somebody, lust. So he never does, he takes it up a notch.
Exactly. Number one, Jesus always, always, always raises the stakes every single time. So why should we think that it's no longer something that we have to do when every other aspect of our lives is always an increase upon that? Yes? Yeah, definitely. Yeah. If this was a command, there would be no point. If it was, I want you to give 10%, then where's the sacrifice? Where's the free will in that relationship? Definitely. Another support of tithing is that Jesus seems to have the opportunity to say words about it, and he doesn't. He kind of commends it. In an encounter with the Pharisees, Jesus kind of calls them out, saying, "You tithe your mint and your dill and your cumin, but you neglect weightier matters of the law." And after that, he says, "These you ought to have done, but without neglecting the others." You miss the whole point. Good to tithe, but you're missing, the big picture. Of course, something we still have to watch out for today. And another reason, the third reason I think that tithing is something God intends, is that since the beginning of history, before the law was ever even established, the people who were said to be walking with God were tithing, before there was ever an explicit command to do that. In fact, it's one of the beautiful pictures of the continuation of the Old Testament into our lives today is, who was the first tithe ever given to? Does anybody know the answer to that? There was definitely sacrifice involved. It doesn't mention specifically the level. Okay, Melchizedek, the very first person who ever received a tithe, this very intriguing, mysterious figure who has no beginning and no end. We don't see his genealogy. We don't know where he comes from. Has some sort of superior relationship to Abraham. And of course, who do we know that Melchizedek represented? Jesus, absolutely. The highest priest after the order of Melchizedek. The first tithe that was ever presented, that was ever mentioned, was not given to just any priesthood, but what would later to be known as an eternal priesthood, the ministry of Jesus Christ himself, something that our tithes continue to support to this very day. Anything else on that before we go on? Anybody want to? Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of good in Malachi. Mm-hmm. Yeah, motivation is a big piece of the giving component today that kind of gets misconstrued. You kind of see all this talk of television preachers. It is absurd what an industry televangelism has become. There's a lot of money in it because it's a lot easier to give if I see this tangible thing in front of me that's going to happen right now. If I'm giving because I want to receive, people are going to give right away. Whenever you're giving, relying on God to give in ways that you might not expect, it's a lot more, that uncertainty, I think, makes it a little trickier to dive into. All right. We're going to skip the next one, two. We might come back to them. I'm just saying I want to get to the others first. So in your handout, go ahead and skip along to just the next page. Spending money we have not been given. Okay. What if I told you that there is an investment out there where you can get a 22% return absolutely guaranteed? And this is not a joke, right? It's completely risk-free, but it is funny. It is interesting. It's out there. You can get a 22% guaranteed return risk-free. It does have a criteria that you have to meet. Does anybody know what the criteria is I'm talking about? Okay, you have to have credit card debt to meet these criteria. 22% return. 22.8% was the average credit card interest rate as of August of last year.
But how much credit card debt do you have?
Well, any amount, really. That's just the rate.
It's just the average credit card
Yeah.
finance charge right now.
Absolutely. For reference, the capital markets over the past 100 years, 9 to 10%. So if you've got credit card debt and you're wondering how to invest your money, we have an easy answer to this question. What an opportunity it is to have credit card debt that you don't have to think about where to invest it. As of August of last year, there was a monumental event that happened in the credit card industry, and that the debt that Americans owed reached a very large number. Anybody know what that number was that happened last year? We hit the $1 trillion mark. Absolutely. Over $1 trillion. You know how much money that is? Is that enough? Is that enough zeros? No. $1 trillion in credit card debt as of August of last year. Man, what a fantastic time to be a credit card company, where you accrue, $220 billion a year in interest. I think it's safe to say that America has a debt problem. We're actually not going to dig into debt very much. Dave Ramsey, Larry Burkett, countless others have a wealth of material on the subject, so I don't want to use too much of our time on it, but I just wanted to bring up a few thoughts concerning debt and our stewardship. If the money that we spend speaks to who we are, then the money that we spend that we don't even have really speaks volumes. And what are we saying when we spend money that we don't have? What does that reveal about us? Okay, absolutely. We're kind of moving on our own timeline. We might be kind of impatient. It's possible that there might be a contentment issue, that we don't, what we have is not enough. Or maybe we're finding our worth in something that is not God. But debt is a very common problem. So it's not something that anybody's alone on, but it is a problem, and it needs to be addressed, because debt prevents us from living the life that God wants for us. In fact, those with consumer debt are 3 times more likely to battle with anxiety and depression. 300% more likely. People with debt are more likely to be overweight, have higher blood pressure. Debt afflicts us with worry in a way that we were never meant to experience, taking us away from focusing our mind on what God does have for us. Proverbs 22, the borrower is slave to the lender. When we engage with consumer debt, it becomes a master to us. It consumes us. And so Paul will later say that we are to be indebted to no one. So if you're battling with consumer debt, you do need to know 2 things. One is you're not alone. This is a very common problem in America and across the world. And 2, your life will need to look drastically different than it does right now. You need to make Dave Ramsey a very close friend. You need to follow his material, his stuff on social media, all of his pages, because your definition of what normal is going to have to change. So that one day, like the Apostle Paul, we'll be able to say that we are a slave to nothing, that we owe nobody anything except to love one another. Because a good steward is mastered by nothing. Mastered by nothing. Okay. The bulk of our time is going to be spent on the next topic. So you've heard it was said that 1/3 of Jesus' parables are about money. But I tell you, that's not really the case. Yes, 1/3 of Jesus' parables mention money. They bring it up as a concept. But that's usually not what the parable is actually about. It's not the subject. At least 10 times, Jesus opens his parables by stating, the kingdom of heaven is like a net, a treasure, a field, a feast. So all that to say, if I were to extrapolate Jesus' teaching to show us how to spend money, that would be ridiculous. I'm not going to do that. And so what I'm not going to do is look at the parable of the talents and say the point of the parable is that we're supposed to be investing in the stock market. I don't think that's the point of the parable. But what I am saying is that a good steward makes use of what they have been given. And there are a lot of ways to do that. We can invest in relationships. Those are the best kind of investments. Sharing experiences, getting to know somebody, fostering those relationships. We can invest in ourselves and certifications and skills to make us more marketable or more useful. We can invest directly into property or businesses. But today, we are going to talk about the stock market because it is easily accessible, it encompasses a lot of detail, and that's where my background is at. So, the stock market. Okay. Wait a minute. Can't we lose money in the stock market? And isn't that gambling? Well, what is the stock market? Imagine there was a way that you could invest in all the small businesses in McPherson. Let's say you could somehow buy ownership of these companies that you like and think would do well, and then they could use that money to try and expand the business, to do better for themselves, to increase their cash flow, however. Now expand that concept to a global level, and you have got the stock market, an exchange of company ownership at a global level. It's a representation of businesses solving problems, and then how the free market responds when those problems are solved. At its very core, the stock market represents human ingenuity. And we can look at the history of the capital markets to learn that apparently we are really good at solving problems. It is almost as if we were created for it. Now, the stock market can be used to gamble, and the stock market can be used to invest. And sadly, I have done both. But what we're talking about today is using the market to invest. So what can we expect from this stock market? You know, it's a lot of people's full-time job trying to answer this exact question, and then try to convince you that their answer is correct. At any given time, any major news outlet is either predicting an upcoming recession or new market highs. And when those are usually your only two options, half the time they're going to be exactly right. And half the time they're going to be exactly wrong. Picture with me, it is 2008, December 29th, and at the end of the year, the market is down 44% from all-time highs, and things are not looking good. If you were to pick up a copy of the Wall Street Journal and look at the front page, this is what you would read. At the end of June 2010, or early July, Panarin, the author, says, the U.S. will break into 6 pieces, with Alaska reverting to Russian control. California will form the nucleus of what he calls the Californian Republic, and that will be part of China, or under Chinese influence. Texas will be the heart of the Texas Republic. A cluster of states will go to Mexico and fall under Mexican influence. Washington, D.C. and New York will be part of the Atlantic America that may join the European Union. Canada will grab a group of northern states that Professor Panarin calls the Central North American Republic. Hawaii, he suggests, will be a protectorate of Japan or China, and Alaska, again, will be subsumed into Russia. Anybody ever read that before? This seems absolutely ridiculous to us right now. But in the midst of the most painful crash of our lifetime, this article was published in the most prestigious financial publication in the world, on the very front page, and it wasn't as a joke. Let's fast forward a few months, and it's March of 2009. The market is still in complete shambles, and on March 9th, the market plunges even lower, with the S&P finishing at 676, down 57% since October of 07. So you go to bed, and you wake up, and the next morning, for whatever reason, the market is up. And it's not just up, but it is way up. By the end of the day, it finishes up 6%. And not only that day, but the market continues to climb, to where in 1 month, the market is up 26%. In 3 months, it's up 39%. And in August of 2009, the market is up 50%. Now, on August 24th, one of the greatest economic journalists in the world published an article. And this journalist had written about the stock market every week for 4 decades, providing the world with some valuable insight. So he writes this article warning us that this bull market we've all been seeing is too good to be true, that it doesn't make any sense, the banking system is still a mess, the economy is still weak, unemployment is still high, and the housing market is an absolute disaster. The very problems that got us into this mess are all still here. And so he guaranteed, because publics can say that word, that the market will be run backwards and that all these gains will completely disappear. But what happened? Like all market stories, this one had a happy ending for those who stayed in the game. The market continued to rally into one of the most profitable decades in market history. But what about those who left? What about those who were maybe persuaded by publications of very prominent authors like this one, like this journalist who spent his whole life studying market predictions and stock patterns? If he was so dreadfully wrong about one of the most explosive rallies in market history, what are the chances that you and I are going to correctly guess when to be in and out of the market? And not just guess right sometimes, but to be right most of the time. Even if you were right every time and you missed this one, it would be financially devastating. How can we think that we know better when even the professionals fail repeatedly? If history tells us anything, it is that time in the market beats timing the market. All right. What else can we expect from the market? Anybody ever seen that acronym before? It stands for S&P Index versus Active. And in 2002, yes, 2002, we started to measure if it was better to try, excuse me, I need a drink real quick. All right, 2002, we started measuring, is it better to try and beat the market with some combination of buying and selling tactics, or is it better to match an index, to buy it and hold it? So Spiva compared the market returns of thousands of market funds, mutual funds, hedge funds, and over the past 20 years of data we have now, what do you think that Spiva discovered? When comparing these funds, these active funds, to their appropriate comparable index, this is what was found. After 5 years, 84% of funds underperformed market indexes. They failed to beat them.
You might explain what an index fund is.
Sure. So an index fund is essentially just a way to where I can index myself to a, to an index, I suppose, to the NASDAQ, to the S&P, to the Russell 1000, and it's just a way to where I can capture the returns of that index. So these funds, all they're trying to do is be a representation of that growth. So as it goes up, my index will go up accordingly. My fund will go up accordingly. As it goes down, vice versa. Anything else before we go on? Okay. After 5 years, 84% of actively managed funds failed to beat the market indexes. After 10 years, this grew to 90% of active funds failed to beat market indexes. After 20 years, over 95% of actively managed funds, we're talking mutual funds, failed to beat the market indexes. What can we learn from this? Well, the vast majority of active fund managers failed to beat their benchmark. To be fair to the TV personalities, the money personalities who are proponents of mutual funds, this data is pretty recent. 2002, not that long ago. And when SPIVA started measuring, who knew what we would find? We had never tracked data like this before. I don't even know if we could have tracked data like this before. But aren't you glad we did? Because look at what we now know. Not only do we see actively managed funds underperforming their benchmarks, one thing I did not mention is that the longer the time frame, the greater degree of underperformance they experienced. Hedge funds, mutual funds, they might have a good year here and there. They might have a good string of years. The consistent and long-term outperformance of the market is so hard, not even the professionals are very good at it. And the punishment for attempting to do so gets worse and worse as time goes on. Investing, at least data-driven investing, is a much simpler and quieter and more reliable way to live your life. A few things we can expect from the market. Can we expect the market to yield positive returns every year? Of course not. That has never happened. Can we expect the market to yield positive returns over time? Yes. For all intents and purposes, yes. Because if I'm wrong, and that's not true, you would be far better off with the portfolio of batteries and ammunition than you would with cash under your mattress. All right, so what kind of returns can we expect? Since we've been tracking, the S&P 500 has yielded between 9 and 10%, depending on your data source. That's the average for nearly 100 years. Now, some people's lifetimes, it was lower than this. For others, people like us, it's been higher than this. And lastly, can we expect to beat the market? I've realized this is a conclusion that everybody has to come to on their own. Usually, me speaking words to you is not going to be enough to change your belief in this, in a person. But me personally, when it comes to beating the market, I would not bet my retirement savings on it. And I certainly would not bet anybody else's either. Okay. Why should we care about investing at all? Why would we learn about it? Well, it's because of this principle that Albert Einstein called the eighth wonder of the world. Anybody know what he was talking about when he said that? Compound interest. Very good. That's right. The money that you make on money that you made with your money. Truly a very wonderful thing. So why do we need it? Long story short, when Social Security was created in the 30s, it was designed to make up 1/3 of a person's income. 1/3 to come from Social Security, 1/3 from their company pension, and another third they would be responsible for. Now, what is the problem with this model today? No pension. Where's my pension? We are not getting a pension. Some of us still are, but this is quickly becoming the minority. So we have become much, much more responsible for creating our own retirement income. Now, let's say that I want to retire when I'm 65 years old. And let's say I want to retire on $1 million. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save every year until I have $1 million. If I start saving at 25 years old, then let me see if that's right. Yes, if I start saving at 25, so I have 40 years, then if I save $25,000 a year, I could have $1 million. Every single year of me saving $25K for 40 years. Or scenario 2, if I want $1 million by the time I'm 65, what I can do instead is I can invest. And rather than saving $25K a year, all I need to invest is $6,000 a year. And instead of doing it for 40 years, it only takes me 30. So I can wait till I'm 35. I can start sooner and have more later. So in scenario 1, I save $1 million of my own money, and it takes me 40 years to do this. Scenario 2, how much do I set aside? $180,000, a difference of $820,000. I will tell you right now, I cannot afford to save $1 million over the course of my lifetime. I'm not going to have that much money. I can't afford it. I can't afford not to invest. I cannot risk not engaging with the capital markets because compound interest makes all the difference in the world. So I would invest. But what do we invest in? And then, in what types of accounts should those investments live in? All right, so our investments should meet the following criteria. Investments should be long-term. Our investments should be able to weather the storms of volatility. Generally, we want to avoid it selling at major losses. So our investments should be in the market for the long term. How long term? We'll talk about that in a little bit. Volatility, the ups and downs of the market that we all experience. Number 2, our investment should be diversified. It should consist of a broad representation of the capital markets. Obviously, we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. Not only because something terrible might happen to that basket, but more often, we're missing out on all the other baskets that performed really, really well. So we want to invest across sectors, maybe across indexes, in order to reduce what risk we are able to control. And then number 3, before we talk about this, I want to mention this is one of the most important things that we will talk about all day. In fact, if you take anything away from this at all, let it be 2 principles. Life is long, and our time on this earth is very short. If we believe that to be true, how we spend our time and our money will reflect it. And number 2, our investments should be low cost. Investments are not free. To hold a certain fund, you'll pay the associated fees. The more actively handled the fund, the greater the fees. We looked at SPIVA. If it's true that it is better to be a passive investor matching market indexes, and the only hard data that we've ever been able to produce indicates this seems to be the case, then we want to fully capture the market returns that are available to us, and we don't want to share them. Because when somebody's making withdrawals from your portfolio, whether it's a fund manager, a financial advisor, it's not only hurting your returns from that year, but that money, the money you're paying in fees every quarter for years, never had a chance to compound. That was money that never got to grow. Fiduciary, very good word. It used to be a very good, popular buzzword that we wanted to find. Today, it's not so much anymore. There's a lot of SEC regulation that allows pretty much everybody to say I'm a fiduciary and at no consequence whatsoever. In fact, I would argue most people use that word, it does not apply. If you want a new F word to use for what you're looking for, I would suggest fee only. That is kind of what we used to understand fiduciary to mean, is now fee only. Okay. So earlier, we looked at an example where we invested $6,000 a year for 30 years to have $1 million. Now, that was assuming a market return of about 10%. Now, imagine I was earning 10% in the market, and I was sharing those returns in the form of fees. Now, after adding up all the front end, the back end load expenses, expense ratios, 12B1 fees, commissions, AUM fees, let's say the fees come out to about 2%. Sorry, I'm getting lost. Okay, so now, instead of my 10%, I'm only getting 8%. How much longer would I have to work to see my balance reach $1 million? An extra year? 2 years? Try 5 years. I would have to work for 5 more years. That's 5 years I'm still clocking into work. If I was trying 65, now it's 70. All because I just did not know how much I was paying in fees. And what's even worse is the ramifications of fees are magnified during retirement. When you're making withdrawals and they're making withdrawals, it is shocking how much more quickly our savings runs out. We're talking up to a decade of our account balances hitting zero earlier than they should have. As Jack Bogle, the late founder of Vanguard, once said, the magic of compounding returns is overwhelmed by the tyranny of compound costs. Now, 2% in fees sounds like a lot. Does that actually happen? Yes. To maybe most of us. Statistically, most American families using a typical broker-dealer, large investment management firm, are paying somewhere between 1.75 and 2.25% all-in cost. Let's say that includes the cost of the expense ratios, meaning the cost of the investments themselves. That'd be all-in cost. I have seen it look much worse than those figures. But we have got to know what our investments cost. This is just so heartbreaking to me because of how significant the impact is of not knowing. To quote Alex Hormozi, founder of acquisition.com, the most expensive thing all of us are paying for is the information we don't know. Our investments should be low cost. Okay, our investments should be long-term, diversified, more importantly, low cost. These criteria can usually be achieved via index funds that we mentioned. Funds that just track an index, like a total stock market fund. Vanguard has these very cheap. You can just go online instantly. Or S&P, NASDAQ, whatever index you're tracking. Okay. Okay. Sorry. We're not going to get to what I was hoping for. We're going to have to skip the investment order of operations and go to the back. If you have questions and you want to stick around, I'm happy to fill in the blanks. All right. Let's look at our last stewardship principle. Sorry, I need to pull up a verse real quick. If you want to follow along, we'll be in Matthew 25, if you have your Bibles. I will also read it right now. Verse 32 says, before him will be gathered all the nations, and he will separate people from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will place the sheep on his right, but the goats on his left. The king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. And the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, thirsty and give you a drink? When did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you sick, in prison, and visit you? And the king will answer them, truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me. Then he will say to those on his left, depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fires prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, you did not welcome me. Naked, you did not clothe me. sick and in prison, you did not visit me. And they will also answer, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked or sick in prison, and did not minister to you? He'll answer them, truly I say to you, as you did not do it to the least of these, you did not do it to me. What did the goats do wrong? Do you think it's a coincidence that the parable immediately preceding this is the parable of the talents? I don't think it's a coincidence at all. It's not that the goats personally caused harm to the needy, obviously not, but it's that they failed to do anything to help them. The goats very well could have been productive people, living their productive lives, and we might even, when they pass on, say, oh man, they're in a better place now. You know, they were a really good guy. But because these people didn't look outside of themselves to see somebody who might need help, God tells them, away with you. Proverbs 19 tells us that if you help the poor, you are lending to the Lord. But goats don't understand this principle. Goats fail to see the connection between helping humanity and serving God. Now, we live in a place and time where financial assistance is usually not the answer to somebody's problems. At least not by itself, it's not. But does that mean there are needy people out there that we can't be helping? Obviously not. We all know somebody whose lives would look better with us being more involved in it. But when money can't solve the problem, what can we do about it? What is money for? Well, we know it reveals our values. It shows it's important to us. And it also shows who is important to us. What if money can be used to show somebody that we care about them? What if meeting somebody's perceived needs could give us a window into their life to try and figure out what is actually going on? What if taking somebody to dinner could give us an opportunity to get to know them and to see what's really happening? Again, we know that money by itself does not solve most problems, but that does not mean that it's not useful in getting down to the root of those problems. Go ahead.
I'm thinking of the scripture that if we see somebody who is hungry and naked and we say to them, go be warmed and be filled, and we've done nothing for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a lot more personal than that. It's a lot harder than that, for sure. A good steward, Principle 6, keeps their options open. Side note, this is an opinion statement of the day, by the way, but this is one of the reasons I am prejudiced against financial products that lock our money away. I'm prejudiced for several reasons, but this is just one of them. Because when we lock our money away, we are limiting our capacity to provide as meaningful of assistance as we might otherwise could have. And not only that, but most financial products that involve locking away our money are usually purchased in a spirit of, in a perceived, reaching some sort of perceived security or stability or maybe even safety. So we're trading away liquidity even for financial optimization and for personal security, stability. But that's my opinion statement of the day. A good steward just keeps their options open. They're prepared to meet a need as it arises. They are ready to help. Not only ready, but they are seeking ways to do so. To finish out, when we manage God's money well, when we position ourselves to better show care and love to the people that He cares and loves, when we give beyond levels that are socially acceptable, we get the attention of the people who have no relationship with their Creator. When we use money to influence eternal outcomes, we teach the world about the very temporary nature of this earth and the eternal nature of this life. Thank you so much for your attention. If you have any questions, happy to answer or help out ever I can. That's all I have.